Welcome, I'm Jane McCarthy, Director of Outreach and Engagement for the UCLA School of the Arts and Architecture. And I'm thrilled to welcome you tonight to our Back to School event with the Visual and Performing Arts Education Program at UCLA Arts. During the program and discussion, please, we encourage you to put your questions in the chat, and then that way the teaching artists can respond to them as we're making art and as we're discussing arts education. So now I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Kevin Kane. He is the director of the VAPAE program and will take us through the rest of the evening. Kevin?
Thank you, Jane. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin. Dr. Kane for some, but Kevin for tonight. It's a pleasure to be here in our first art making webinar. I'm the director of the Visual Performing Arts Education Program, as Jane mentioned. It's a school-wide minor in arts education, which allows students to declare a minor in arts education, while many are also majoring in an art form with the goal of becoming a teaching artist, an artist educator, or a community engaged artist of some kind. We have a really wonderful program that is a series of coursework, all about arts education, but it also brings our students into the community through K through 12 classrooms, now being implemented virtually, like the rest of the city and the country and most of the world, I assume. But in normal or typical times, we'd be going into classrooms and also doing after-school programs, weekend programs. So our program is very much committed to being of the community, with the community, and making art as together as a tool to bring us closer as a city, and also help our students really understand the importance of arts in our lives. I'm incredibly lucky to be working with a wonderful team, and I'll just sort of give a quick shout out to the team that's here. Our program coordinator, Amaret Mozingo, is here. Amaret, you just want to say hi?
Hey everyone, glad to see you.
Thanks, Amaret. Raimundo Baldassar is here. He put together a nice little DJ set there. He's the community engagement coordinator. Raimundo, you're there?
Greetings, everybody, and welcome.
And our evaluation and research coordinator, Lindsay Kunisaki, is here, I believe, as well.
Hi, everybody.
Great, thank you. So what are we doing tonight? We are hoping to share a little bit about our strategies and our theoretical approach to making art as a community, but primarily we wanted to be together during some very challenging times to experience why the arts is important to so many of us, why it helps us through good times and bad times. Primarily tonight is one art project, but we have so many different kinds of projects that our students help develop and teach. Tonight we're thinking about the world we're living in, what we've just been through the past 6 months, and maybe continue to live through. I would say a convergence of emergencies. So it's a whole lot that we've been dealing with, and art seems to be both a place for expression as well as reflection. And so we'd like to make some postcards tonight. And the postcards are a way to practice self-reflection, asking ourselves, you know, what we've been through, what we care about, what we're going through, what we're feeling, and then some opportunities to create together by making postcards. I think the reflection part for our students is a way into creative process to sort of slow the moment down and think about what medium we like, what messages we want to put out there, what motifs we're drawn to. We are all tonight going to make one postcard unless you're incredibly ambitious, but we're going to show you about 3 different strategies to make a postcard for yourself and with your family. Hopefully there's some young ones in the room as well. We specialize in doing arts with K through 12, but we also have a focus on families coming together to make art. And one of the mantras we have is there is no right or wrong in art. We won't be showing these pieces to each other tonight unless you're very interested to do so in the future. In a webinar format, we can't quite see the little boxes we have in Zoom, but it's a chance to feel meditative reflective, and creative. And to do that in our homes, I think is really helpful. The essential question tonight will be, what is resilience during the time of COVID? And maybe one of our VAPA team members can just put the word resilience in the chat so we know what we're talking about. I'd like to pass it to Amaret, who's going to lead us in a kind of reflective practice, which is interactive and kind of cool. Amaret, do you want to take it?
You got it. Thank you so much, Kevin. So we're going to be thinking tonight about what does resilience look like during the time of COVID-19. In the pre-show video, you saw a slide that says to prepare for this brainstorming activity together by texting VAPA 362 to 22333. Those instructions will be put into the chat for you all if you haven't done so already. So again, take out your phones. We're going to text VAPA program 362 to 22333. Then you're going to receive a confirmation message that you've joined the session. I'm going to give everybody just a couple of moments, and then I'm going to give some further instructions. All right, so we're going to just chat a little bit about what does resilience look like during this time. And so thinking about the definition of resilience, thinking about strength, endurance, momentum, you know, how have these past 6 months, how have you shown resilience? How have your loved ones, your friends, your families shown resilience? How has your community at large shown resilience? How have you expressed resilience? I'd like for us to take a moment to think about that and then maybe summarize it in about 1 to 2 words. Once we've summarized that sort of thought process in 1 to 2 words, what you'll do is you'll text 22333. You'll text those 1 or 2 words to that number, and we're going to brainstorm together. So I'm going to share the screen and show you a word cloud. So already we have some words that are auto-populated, that some folks are feeling community represents resilience during the time of COVID-19. I'm seeing some words start to populate as folks are texting their 1 to 2 words to 22333. I'm seeing loving getting quite large. I'm seeing community, feeling, breath, patience. These are all really during this time. Self-care, understanding, so important during these, unprecedented moments to auto-populate. But I want us all to be thinking about these words that we see in the word cloud as we move on with the art activity tonight. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, but I want us all to keep in mind all of these words that we see on the screen. And I just want to take note that I love that community is the largest word, and hopefully we're going to be building some community tonight. My colleague Lindsay Kunisaki is going to be talking to you all about the social emotional aspects of the art activity tonight. So Lindsay, can I hand that off to you?
Yes, thank you, Amaret. And hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay Kunisaki. And so, like Amaret mentioned, tonight we're going to be thinking about resilience in terms of social emotional learning. And social emotional learning is basically just this idea of how we know ourselves, how we relate to others, and how we make decisions and kind of move through the world. So when we're thinking about that in terms of the arts, we can think about how we make decisions in our art and about our artwork, how we kind of manage our emotional responses to really challenging situations. We can think about how we build community by sharing our work or working together with others, and how we express our identities and kind of process our experiences through our art. So these are just some ideas to kind of keep in the backs of our minds as we introduce our different approaches to making these postcards of resilience. So now that I've kind of shared some ideas to keep in mind, I'll pass it over to my colleague Raimundo, who can share some materials that you might want to have on hand. Raimundo?
And thank you, Lindsay. And hello, everybody. My name is Raimundo again, and just wanted to let you know that since you are starting to create your creative home, materials are very important, of course. So there's one way that you can immediately start that process by gathering some of the ingredients that you may, or ingredients and materials that you may already have at home. I think I might already given you a clue. There is many materials perhaps already in your spice rack and your kitchen that you will need. However, some of the ones that are essential already here. It costs about $5. Everything that you already saw in your materials list, it's already in here. Color pencils, brushes, and of course, if you're gonna be working together, grab attention, have something like this so they can go ahead and be able to pay attention when it's ready to get started. Now, other materials, I'll go ahead and show you once the art making and the demo starts. So with that said, I'm gonna pass it on to Lindsay or Amaret.
I think I'm going to take it, Raimundo. Thank you. So as we start to think about what kind of art we're going to make, again, we're letting the word resilience and that word cloud sort of inspire some of our choices. We might have some impulses. We're responding to the look and the feel of some of the materials that we've gathered. We are going to show a few different approaches to making a postcard that's both self-reflective and personal. But we also want you to have an opportunity to choose the medium or the process that works best for you. As I mentioned earlier, I'm so lucky to have a wonderful team of both educators, but all artists in their own right. And that's true of our whole VAPAE program. So I asked Raimundo, Lindsay, and Amaret to respond to resilience and to create a postcard using the medium that they are kind of feeling in the moment, some of the materials that were inspiring them, and you know, a process that's very personal to them, but they were willing to share with you. Please use it as an example, and we can actually share these art lessons with you later. So if you're very interested in the actual step-by-step that they're going to share, we're going to try to share that with you later as well. But let's start by seeing the way that Lindsay responded to the question, what is resilience? Lindsay?
Thanks, Kevin. So I was exploring the idea of intrapersonal resilience. So that's the idea of knowing myself and asking myself the question of how do I keep myself strong, especially in times like this that we're all going through. So I decided to explore this through illustration. And so I started out by just brainstorming a few words that kind of sum up 3 big activities that I think really keep me strong. And those came out to think, make, and listen. Then I kind of continued to think about, well, what are some things that make those activities really specific to me? What does it look like when I'm thinking? Where do I like to do that? What kinds of things do I use to do these activities? And then I came up with small, simple patterns and filled them into these bubble letters as sort of a note to self, to remind myself of how I keep myself strong during these times and how I really try to support my own intrapersonal resilience. So again, if this is a project that you think you might like to take on, we'll be sending out instructions in the chat a little bit later. You'll have a PDF with some step-by-step tips for how to make your very own note to self illustrated resilience. So now I'm going to pass it on to Raimundo, who can talk a little bit about his approach to resilience.
Thank you, Lindsay. And here we are. Hello, everybody. So what I'm going to be doing is going to be choosing collage and text to talk about resilience through identity and expression. And the way I wanted to do that is immediately by asking myself the question, how have I been resilient through this time? And most especially, perhaps the word resilient may be a word that not many of the students or the children in your home may not just yet know. And there's one way to ask that. What are your strengths and how have you been powerful during this time? Right now, if you have some magazines, I'll go into detail in a second. The way I like to do that is by following. I follow the things that I like and I find a magazine, an article that I love. I love donuts. One way that you can get started by talking about your personal expression and identity, most especially during this time, eating donuts is a good way. Now, one way to get started is by looking at a story, an article. grab your Sharpie, especially if it's a dark color, and start to block out the words that you do not want and only leave the words that you do want. Once you have that, you're going to use those words to start to create your collage, and using context, color, and as a way to match these visuals with how it is that you're responding to how it is that you are being resilient. I'll go into detail in a second during the art making, and for now, I'm going to pass it over to Amaret.
Thanks so much, Raimundo. So in my area of expertise, I chose painting, and I really wanted to think about interpersonal resilience. I wanted to think about the ways in which my friends, my family, my loved ones, how their actions, the way that we communicate to each other, they have a ripple effect on one another. So it's very much about the community surrounding me. And so I thought about, oh, that kind of stimulates a ripple effect. I think I want to paint my interpretation of what my version of a ripple effect looks like. And so what I do is I'm going to tilt the screen down to show you. I've got my studio all set up. So I've got my materials here. I've got my paintbrush, my water, I've got a paper towel for cleaning my brushes in between colors. I've got my postcard, and I've got my paint all ready to go. So before I begin taking to the postcard, I like to create a color palette. So what I did was I chose a number of colors, and like Kevin mentioned earlier, I followed my instinct, and my instinct drew me to a lot of different colors. I decided to use one color as a background, so I chose the yellow as my background. And then I just started to draw some circles, thinking about how these are all different representations of people within my community, and how some are very large actions, some are very small actions, but they all connect to one another. And then that turned out to this piece right here, where all of the intersections sort of overlap, and how this was able to demonstrate interpersonal resilience. And so I believe with that, I either toss it back over to Kevin, and I think we get started with making art.
Thank you, Amaret. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Raimundo. So again, the three art forms that I heard were illustration, that Lindsay did using three activities that are inspiring to her, or that she either likes to do or misses doing. And then she took those ideas and kind of created an illustration. Raimundo started with a magazine and wanted to create a collage with text. So Raimundo's mixing images, things he likes, things that are his strengths. He's mixing words. He's going to mix images from the collage magazine, and he's going to share a little more about what that looks like. I think Raimundo has a really cool example of that. And then Amaret just talked us through her process of thinking about using paint and painting as a way of developing her ideas and elaborating on the motif of ripple, a ripple effect and overlapping. So those are just some ideas we're going to share with you, but mostly we're here to see what you can come up with. You can use all of those ideas. And right now we have a few PDFs of those lessons that we just heard from the teaching artists. And if you want to sort of explore one or more of those, maybe one of our, they're uploading right now. Great. So we're going to get the PDFs, which have the step-by-step instructions, but you could actually just start by finding your materials, starting to think about some of your ideas, think about some of the words that you brought up when you were thinking about resilience, maybe look at your materials. And we wanted to give like 20 minutes, really, a substantial amount of time for you to spend time with either yourself and your canvas, which today is a postcard, or work together in the home. We want to keep our ideas flowing as well. So we're going to keep talking. Hopefully we are inspiring your process and not annoying you. And we also received several questions prior to tonight's webinar that we might use this time to answer some of those questions. So with that in mind, you have three suggestions or invitations to create art through a postcard that's very personal, reflective, but you really have any way of doing it. There's no right or wrong in art making. That's what we share with a lot of our students from a very early age up until college age. So with that said, why don't you take a moment, look at your materials, start to think about some of your approaches. Think about whether you want to think about intrapersonal ideas, the way you're connecting inside yourself right now. Thinking about the way you might want to think about interpersonal. These words are all in the chat, which is the way you're building resilience by connecting to each other. Or you might think about your resilience through your own personal identity, your expression of yourself, who you are in the world, what you like, what you're proud of, what you think represents yourself. So right now in the link, I just saw Amaret, thank you so much. There's a link to the illustrated postcard. There's a link to the collage. And there's a link to the acrylic painting postcard. So I'm gonna let you all get started. We're gonna play music just for a few minutes for you to get into your vibe, to get into your flow. Forgive us if the music stops and we start answering some of your questions. And by all means, if you have a question about art making, please put it in the chat and either Amaret or Raimundo or I can answer them. If you want to see Raimundo's project, he's showing you right now. So Raimundo, would you mind, as you're showing us, tell us a little bit about your process going from step 1 to step 2? I have a question from someone in there. Someone in the room would love to hear about how you built this project.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. Now that you have, I've switched my camera, now you will hear my voice, but this is me right here. Hello, everybody. So now that we're here in the process making, I just wanted to share with you the process of what I share with you briefly. Once you have the story, the article that you have liked or chosen based on the question, and right now we're talking about resilience through identity and expression in a time of COVID. Now, there could be so many things to talk about in a lot of the ways that you can engage this topic that could become complex is by, again, bringing a story that is quite fun. We're talking about the history of Stan Donuts. So the story is right here. This is exactly what I meant, where I would highlight the words that I wanted and then cover those that I do not want. Now, to make it a little bit more interesting, and also I love textures, I then transfer that, I blew up the text, and then now you have almost like a watercolor motif patina into the letters, and they have been highlighted. Now it's time to cut and do collage. Once you have started to collect images, I have a lot of images that I've been collecting in my special little box. So if you want to continue collaging, I suggest that you start collecting items. This is my secret stash of words. Oh my God, RuPaul. So I have RuPaul there. I would love to do a RuPaul collage. There's a lot of other very important things that I've been collecting throughout the time. However, that's for later. Once you have chosen your words in your poem, find a layout. Find the images that could talk about those words. And then this is one challenge for all of you. Now, this poem is obviously going to sound a little bit funny or perhaps maybe a little bit different for others. But once you read it out loud, start to put the words into motion. Start to match them, whether you want this here, do you want this there, and then ultimately try to find a motion, any motion to those words and those images, and then continue to move forward. Now, one last thing that I'll do until I can pass it to Amaret. Make sure that you do not, you do not start to glue or put tape onto any of the images. Think about chess or checkers. Once you make a move on collage, you may not move it back. So do not glue anything until you're 100%. Now I'll pass it on to Amaret.
Can I just check, just to make sure, I hope all the links are working. Can anyone who's in the room, are the links working yet? It seems like VAPA might give us permission to access these links. Just curious, I'd be happy to know if they're open yet. They're open, yay, okay. So the links to all those lesson plans are in the chat and it seems like they're open now. Thank you. So Amaret, your link's open for the acrylic painting, but maybe you could talk us a little bit through what you're doing and how you've been putting it together, okay?
Absolutely. So as you all saw, I had a blank postcard that I just started to paint on. So one of the most anxiety-ridden parts of a blank canvas such as this is just how do I begin? And so what I like to do is choose a background color and just cover the entire paper so that I don't have to worry about what my first mark is. I know that I've got my entire background to work with. And so when I started to think about the ripple effect, I wanted to demonstrate a lot of different thicknesses of lines and shapes and colors. And so with this brush, as you can see, it's quite loaded with paint and it's got a thicker brush stroke. So this allowed me to be able to load it up with paint and to make some really thick outlines of circles. I'm going to transition to another brush that I have, which is quite thin. This one's very, very tiny. So with this brush, I'm going to load it up with some paint and notice that I don't really need too much paint. If I want to make a thin line, I don't need too much paint. And so here, I'm just going to start painting some very small circles because I wanted to be able to demonstrate a lot of different representations of how interpersonal resilience is demonstrated, how a lot of larger and smaller actions can kind of come together and form a ripple effect. You know, as somebody that has quite a number of housemates, it's always really important to understand the ways in which our communications, our actions, you know, how we treat each other during this time can really cause that sort of effect. And as you saw, I started to rotate my canvas. And so sometimes if I find it a little bit hard or if I'm gonna, you know, get some paint on my arm, I already got some on my elbow, I'll rotate my canvas so that I'm able to start painting in some other areas. So as you can see, I've got some more circles started. And then I was able to continue this through selecting a number of different colors. So I had some red in there as well. And then I was able to really, you know, go to town on this and just start to layer it even more and even more for all of these different ripple effects. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, what I'm working with right here. I'm really excited to see folks upload their versions, what they think resilience is and how they've interpreted it through, you know, painting or illustration or collage. And they can upload that by posting their pictures with using the hashtag UCLA VAPAE. And we'll be able to see a lovely, lovely gallery of artwork from tonight. Kevin, how are you doing over there?
Good. So for Raimundo and Amaret, I see that you might have some questions in the chat based on your presentation. So if I could pull you away a little bit from your art.
Go ahead. We're here.
Oh my goodness, go ahead, throw them our way.
Well, Raimundo, there's a question to you about your use of the word motion. So you're creating a collage with text, but you use motion. Do you mean arms that are reaching for the words, or maybe you know, it looks like that's what your collage is sharing, but maybe you want to talk a little bit about your use of motion.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. That question could definitely be with when you're approaching to looking at the images, the visuals, right? There's motion and action. There is hand gestures and such. However, with the words, since there's no physical limbs or anything, what I mean with motion is the following. Can the word appear in any other way? For example, we usually go left to right in the linear form, right? So now this is what I mean with motion. So I'm gonna get rid of this little eyes that I put around, but this is what I mean with directional or motion. Now, what if these words now became ray of lights shining down upon these individuals? You change the direction of the words, and now also, not only are you changing the direction of the words, but you're also changing the direction of the poem itself. Because now that they're in this side, now you have a whole different way of reading this. For example, before we were able to probably read it right through it because there were a lot of lines. But right now, just because my hands are a little bit sticky right now, one of the things that I'm talking about too is ensuring that these words also get closer to the individuals or to the images. Now, I want to show you another example now that you've seen this to show you a little bit more of motion. Give me a second. Let me switch that. Also, by the way, this is a great example on how you can do many collages. Get some cheap cardboard, break up some boxes, and then use them easily so then you can pass them around. And if you found a layout that you like, keep it. Don't move it. Now, let me show you a little bit more of what I meant with motion. Now, this is an example. Now, I'm already scaffolding the idea, and now I'm bringing not only motion, but also color and text. Here's an example. This, obviously, for me, this is a duality. It's a little bit of expression of my identity. 2 locations, Mexico, Los Angeles, and 1 voice, 2 cities. Now, right here, if you speak Spanish, I am missing a D-E-S. So you cut something else and then you add it and collage it in. So yes, I noticed there's a missing S. However, motion, this would be a great idea. Now, can this be piercing the image? Can this be heightened this way? Get the words to collide, get the words to cross, to juxtapose. Then it becomes very interesting. And not only that, you can also take into consideration a third option. Find larger text. And now the text itself is moving. It's going to the left, it's going to the right, it's going each way. That's what I meant with motion. And you can definitely find a lot of motion through words, not just imagery. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, Raimundo. We did have some questions that came before, and that I want to get to, but I wanted to, if possible, show you a little bit and talk you a little bit through the way our art lessons look. So I'm just going to open one. The art lessons I've heard are now available in the chat. I'm pretty sure I heard that the links are working, which is good. So maybe I'll share screen and just show you the way we design one of our lessons. I'll only take a few minutes because you should have access to this. But notice that our teaching artists in the VAPAE program like to, whenever possible, create art lessons that give an essential question or a big question to ask. Sometimes it's a big word like resilience. And no matter what age we're at, I think words can be a really great jumping off point, an idea, a concept, or a question. So in this case, we thought today we would use resilience. And for those young ones in the room, maybe that's the first time you've used that word, but now you're making art about that word, which is also vocabulary acquisition and acquiring language. But for those of us who have learned that word many years ago, it's a chance to rethink what we think that word means. And so we like to think our lessons are helpful for students of all ages, including lifelong learners, as old as even myself. Thank you very much. The step-by-steps are very helpful for some folks, though some artists really like to just kind of feel their way through a project and not actually know step 1, step 2, step 3. One of the things we really emphasize is creative process. So even if the steps are the same for every student, we would love when we see different art projects emerging as the final product. So even though the instructions are the same, people hear them and internalize them and understand them differently, and they end up making a different art project, so that everyone's art project is very unique to them. And so the way that Lindsay started her process to create illustration, if I can speak for Lindsay, was to ask herself questions about which we call brainstorming. And if you see up at the top, she used a separate piece of paper to just sort of get her notes down there. What are some of the things that she really enjoys doing, or some of the things she misses doing? And then she picked 3 of her favorites, as she mentioned. She then got her blank canvas and started to place them with kind of dividing her space. What would a trio of words look like? 3 words, what would that look like? Then she started putting the words in there, first in pencil, then with a black Sharpie to kind of commit to those words. And then she started bubbling the letters. If you look really closely, you can see that she then started illustrating inside the letters. And those are probably very personal images for her. She started to add color and pattern. And then finally, it's a note to self, a way to sort of think about it every day. Am I thinking? Am I making? Am I listening? And so hopefully, Lindsay, I represented your process well. And hopefully those in the room are still making their art, still responding to their impulses. Here's one question that came our way that I thought maybe would be helpful to talk about. At least a couple questions came about how do you make art activities work in a home that could be very busy and have a lot of different ages. We teach from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade, and we'd like to be adaptable in our lessons so that any lesson that's taught at the kindergarten or pre-K level could be adapted or scaffolded, extended or expanded to work with people of all ages. But I think one thing I'd like to point out is, Raimundo, I really liked how you had a designated art. Well, back in my day, we called them art boxes, but that's actually not a box, it's a container. But it could be helpful for your family if you have a designated area, but also an organized container where all the art supplies are, and that everyone in your house has their own individual container would be perfect, so that people can really create an attachment and a connection to their art projects. I also loved how in our instructions, there you go, Raimundo. That might look different in different people's homes, but everyone having their own access to their own materials would be really helpful. A busy schedule is definitely a reality for a lot of us, or all of us. And so I think in some ways art can be done spontaneously when the feeling feels right and we're sitting around thinking, what do I want to do now? Or it could be scheduled just like any other class. But if our students are working remotely and virtually, they want to get off Zoom a lot. And so this is a way to continue learning. We learn so much about ourselves, about other people, and our identity through the project. So I'd like to say that any of these 3 activities that you learned today could be appropriate for any age child that you might be working with in your own life. Let's see what there's another question. I thought this was an interesting question. Are we finding that students are lacking inspiration to make art during this time? And there's another question is, how difficult is it to inspire students to create art during this difficult time? Well, really, really valid questions. My background is actually theater. And of course, theater is done in the same room with each other traditionally. So it's very difficult to do it in a Zoom box. But I think, you know, that's one of the things VAPAE is committed to, is creating innovative curriculum. And so this past March, we really pivoted to start to figure out ways to teach our classes, teach art remotely, not just to our UCLA students, but also to the classrooms we were working in. And I think some days are better than others, but I have to say, we've all as artists learned that there's some pretty cool things you could do online that you actually don't have the chance to do when you're in the same room together. And Amaret, I'm wondering, were there any examples from our classes where we discovered some cool things we could do remotely that we didn't do in person? And how was that helpful in inspiring young people to stay optimistic and hopeful during tough times?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. So, one, I guess, response to that question that I internally had an answer for was exactly what we're doing today. You know, making art that is really responsive to the moment, especially when you're trying to process a lot of different events, a lot of different emotions, a lot of different situations. It can be really exhausting to just consume, and how are you able to express it and respond to it? So I think that that was a lot of the focus with our super fast pivot to remote learning and teaching in the spring quarter. So during the March to June months. And so with our undergraduate students, they were able to find ways to collaborate with one another as well as their own K through 12 students. And one way that I thought was really exciting that I wonder if you know, some young ones can interact with their friends is that they were able to make an interpretive dance and collage it together. So the way in which that they were able to do that was one person would record themselves kind of like how I am now, and they would do a motion. So I might use my arms to circle around, and I'll do that for about 5 seconds and then I'll cut it. And then I'll ask Raimundo maybe if he wants to turn on his video and he can do a motion for another 5 seconds. So then we start to build this collage. Raimundo, I see you're here. Did you want to join me in this interpretive dance moment?
I'm always down.
Get the spotlight on Raimundo real quick.
Buddha's gonna dance for us? All right.
Oh my God, what? Also, if I may jump in on one of the things that I have noticed, especially through our community engagement programs, right now there's a lot of no's. No, you may not go. No, you may not enter. No, you may not do that. No, you may not touch that. No, you may not go out without a mask. Don't stay on the no, stay on the yes. And that sometimes could really create a lot of participation, because the question could be asked, what is it that you're missing? Instead of the question being, what is it that you don't have anymore? And right now, there's definitely not a lack of hardship challenges that we're all dealing with. So at least try to bring the yes into the conversation. One of the things that I did here with this collage, and now I'm going to switch the camera so you can be able to see it now that it's starting to dry now. And one of the things that I really wanted to do is ensure that the art making part was going to be, Billy, if you can spotlight my camera right here. Thank you. So one of the things I did, you might have seen me before I continue, I grabbed just a ruler or anything else to start pressing so my fingers and my fingerprints don't stay on the paper. But one of the things that I wanted to do is, again, this idea of this visual is perhaps very serious, a lot of emotion. Now, I juxtapose that idea of the visual with something that is text, and it is perhaps a little bit more approachable. It's a story about donuts. So now here's a juxtaposition of the visual and the words. And ultimately, this will inspire at least, or hopefully will create some smiles with certain people. Because let me read this poem. I think you might enjoy it. Over the years, frying the donuts, watching me, I see three faces until I deliver. They come in and sit down and facing the window. Who is that? Beautiful. No one knew. Comes in, looked, friends. So now the seriousness of perhaps the image with the wording and the text now creates another opportunity for you to talk about something and introduce and not go right into the visual, but rather you're using this story about donuts and they're very desperate for donuts. But now you switch that question to something else and perhaps there may be something there for you to continue to talk. Now, one thing that you might have noticed here just with my postcard, now that we're starting to wrap up, you see that I still have this full image right here. The reason I kept that there is because I didn't want to start cutting again. One of the things that I want to make sure you do for collaging is don't make a move if you're not ready. Don't cut the image, don't cut the word, don't start gluing if you're not ready. Now that I feel ready, this is what I'm going to do. I will be cutting this portion down, and then as the last step, what I tend to do all the time, for example, here's an example of another collage. You see textures and such. Try to keep these are very delicate. What I like to suggest is if you make a collage, make a copy of it. So then that way it's without the original materials. Now you're able to share it amongst other people, perhaps even put a stamp and mail it. So that's a little bit of an insight, and perhaps also some insight into the idea of what you could do to engage creativity and engagement with the students.
Thanks, Raimundo. While we still have you, there's a couple other questions. We're running out of time, but maybe you can quickly just list a few off, and then somehow tie in the idea that we have this thing called VAPA TV, which is basically our own YouTube channel. Because a couple questions are coming in. Are we providing resources to classroom teachers? The answer is yes. Are we providing online regular art teaching? We are creating what's called asynchronous lessons, which means you don't have to be in the room at the same time like tonight to do them. But Raimundo, can you share a few of the lessons that are already up on VAPA TV? I think it's worth noting as a proud director that these are developed with Raimundo, with the lecturers, with the teachers, but our UCLA students are creating some really cool projects. And I see Arushi asked, could you even give some examples of innovative curriculum that's been done through remote teaching? So we only have a minute, and I know that's hard, but VAPA TV and how folks in the room might have access to some innovative curriculum.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. I will share my contact information if you want to follow up. I would love to chat. However, some of the examples could be very easy. Right now, we have the Zoom gaze. Everybody's staring in. But how about if you move it out? VAPA TV, the concept with that is sharing 24/7. VAPA TV, for just in case, it's our revamped YouTube channel, in where it is all of our creative communities all at once, available 24/7. Not only will you see video art lessons that you can follow that were designed, created, and put together by all of our VAPA teaching artists, also some of this creative curriculum that is innovative, especially right now, we're also working on bringing in the performing arts. Performing arts, just like Kevin said, it's very challenging for the Zoom. However, challenge yourself to start to see beyond the box. For example, we are developing a performing arts dance movement video lesson in where we're gonna actually choreograph to the box. So what does it mean to move to this side, to that side, to this side, to that side? And also starting to share the idea of front and back. There's a lot of motion within the box, and that is one thing that perhaps you wanna start to do. Engage the student to not just see that this is static, but rather it's a way for you to make connections. Last one, perhaps it's an easy one. If you have the Zoom, if you have the Boomerang app, if you have a large class, or even between families or 5 people, 6, 2 people, stand right in the middle of your box. You have those 4 walls, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, you have other friends within that Zoom call. Start high-fiving each other. Let's see how we can do it. High five here, high five there. And then all of a sudden, through Boomerang, you're starting to see a unity happening, but also what's happening is movement. They're starting to engage, and they're starting to talk to each other, even if they don't see that. That's the kind of creative pedagogy that's coming through our VAPA teaching artists. And I also, of course, would like to welcome you to subscribe to VAPA TV, especially now that we have started our new quarter. We're about to start our new quarter. More videos will be available that you can download at your leisure. And also, please connect with us through Instagram. We have stories and reels for you to continue to do art making, at least within the hour, or you may not have enough time. So if you want to commit short, or long term, VAPA TV might be the place for you. Thank you for that question. And
Sorry, here's an easy one. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? I don't know if that's easy. It feels.
no, it's really hard. Amaret?
Oh, this is very hard. I have so many flavors that are my favorite, but this is also my favorite question. I think that my favorite flavor, my go-to, is probably chocolate chip cookie dough. I think that's it. I want to say that I'm lactose intolerant, so I like to make a lot of sacrifices. Raymond,
I'm with you. Though, if you ever had nieve de limón, I don't know what's the right translation, but it's almost like a gelato, but lemon. Yeah, that's my favorite. Thank you for that. I love that.
All right. Well, that was a nice little change there. Let's see. I think I have time for one more question. They're coming in from different places for me. So, well, there's a question about whether VAPA as a minor is open to all UCLA students or just artists, or how do people maybe start to dip their toe into some of the arts education coursework? Amaret, as program coordinator, I think that's a good question for you. Maybe in a minute, you could give an overview of the program.
I can do just that. I've been leading nothing but new student orientations this entire summer. So I wanted to say that, yes, all students are welcome to engage with VAPA in any way, in any way that they would like to. So specifically for undergraduates, if they're first or second years, what I want to encourage them to do is to take our general education course, which is Arts Education 20. It's actually taught by Kevin Kane right there, and it's an introduction to community engagement through the arts. And it's a really great way to get to know the field of arts education, how the community is united through the arts, how the arts can inform the community, how community informs the arts. And it's a great way to get to know VAPA as a program. For undergraduates that are in their third and fourth year, I would recommend taking our beginning course, their Arts Education Teaching Sequence, which is Arts Education M102. I will say that although our VAPA minor is open to all students, regardless of their major, the one component that is so necessary is creative practice. So if you are going in to teach in our classrooms, ideally you would have a creative practice to teach those K through 12 students, whether it is writing, music, performing arts, theater, visual arts, painting, photography, any combination of any sort of creative practice is what we would love to see from our students. We really want to welcome an interdisciplinary approach to the arts like we did today. We talked about a number of different disciplines, as well as gave some examples of some performative disciplines that you can do via Zoom. And so that VAPA minor is excellent. Raimundo, myself, and Lindsay Kunisaki are all VAPA minor alumni, so we really know this program inside and out. If that's something that you're interested in and you're an undergrad student or know an undergrad student interested in VAPA, maybe what we can do now is drop our emails in the chat, and you can send us an email with any questions that you might have.
Yeah. And Lindsay, sorry, Amaret, can you put in the website as well? Because I see one question here, and this will be, I guess, the last question for the evening. Who are the teachers in our program, and how diverse is the teaching staff? Actually, I'll just quickly say that we're very committed to the concept of what we call EDIA. Maybe Amaret, you could just write that acronym in there: equity, diversity, inclusion, and access. And it starts with one of the first things I talked about today, which is that to ask yourself to think of yourself as an artist, and that there are no mistakes in art. And so the idea that everyone has access to arts education is a great philosophy, but we know as we go around the city that that's just not happening, and it's certainly not happening equally distributed around the city during the time of Corona. So VAPA, if anything, is just trying to be a part of the solution to provide more equity, more inclusion, and more access to arts education. We work with a big network of schools and teachers, public schools, primarily Title I schools. So these are underserved schools and under-resourced schools, and we want to sort of place ourselves where we can be of service to our community, but also we learn so much from working in those communities. We become stronger educators, artists, and people by being a part of our community. Another thing I'll say is our teachers, our lecturers are from a wide range of backgrounds, both artistically and personally, and it's a real commitment of ours to create diversity so that our faculty represents the racial and ethnic, religious, linguistic diversity of our great city. And so maybe if you check out our website, hopefully that's another inspiring thing. Finally, I'm just going to share the screen for a second, but Everett, maybe you can drop in the 7 big questions. So as we circle back to one of the first concepts we had about social emotional learning in the art, I hope this link is open. I was told it was, but the 7 big questions you might have as a takeaway is what we're calling maybe best practices in social emotional learning in the creative household. And these are just some ideas to think about. Social emotional learning is how we get to know ourselves, build positive, healthy relationships with others, how we start to identify what our strengths are and the things we're proud of. And it helps us sort of manage our emotions, not to negate our emotions, but to sort of understand them as part of our complexity as human beings, but also figure out a way to remain strong and optimistic. So we asked, and this is it in the chat? I can't see, Amrit. We're going to get it there. Okay. So going back to the first couple of questions and ideas we had, which is how does SEL or social emotional learning help to the intrapersonal, what's going on inside of ourselves? And we're going to let you leave with some of those ideas. Interpersonal, how they help us connect to others around us through social awareness, relationship building, relationship skills. And finally, with that self-awareness, how are we taking that and bringing ourselves out into the world? And I can actually just copy this. It's going to be a little bit of an ugly link, but oh, you have the, sorry, Amrit, I didn't see that you had the 7 questions in there. So that's one takeaway for those who are heading their families. Maybe you want to ask yourself some of those questions in terms of the ways that your children are continuing to evolve and develop and grow and remain joyful and creative during this tough time. Also, it's something that I wanted to do in the beginning, but I wasn't sure a webinar would do it. But I would love, with the idea of making a connection, if everyone who's still in the room would just type in their first name and maybe share what their major was at UCLA or when they graduated or anything about yourself so that we have some sense of who we just spent the last hour with. April, thank you. It was inspiring and fun, and we really enjoyed putting it together. Thank you, Imani. I really appreciate it. Imani wrote, it was a welcome opportunity to reflect and create. And hopefully that's what every art class can be. Jane loves chocolate chip. Mint? What? Aya, I think Aya is a former student of mine, if it's the same Aya. So Aya, I hope you're doing well, staying strong. Jen, thank you for joining us. Thank you. I'm going to pass it back just with a few minutes left to Jane. Jane, are there any follow-ups? I mean, I think this could be the first in a series. There's some idea we have of maybe building on our school programs and our community programs by offering a general open kind of art program for anyone who wants to drop in. And maybe we'll continue to have access to the folks in the room tonight to share updates and more things that we're doing in VAPA. Thanks, Jane.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you to everyone tonight for joining us. I really hope you enjoyed this art making project. I know I did, and I have a few ideas for projects to do with my own daughter now. And a huge thank you to Raimundo, to Amaret, to Lindsay, and Kevin, of course, and the entire teaching staff at VAPA. You really do incredible work at UCLA and throughout the LA community. So thank you so much for that. And as everyone said, Kevin and Amaret and Raimundo, Please feel free to reach out with questions about the program specifically, other art making projects, or any other programs at UCLA Arts. I would highly recommend going to VAPA TV YouTube, their YouTube channel. Amazing videos there, a lot more instruction, a lot more really interesting conversation about arts education. And of course, please hashtag your work with hashtag UCLA VAPAE. And that will start to make an amazing gallery on the Instagram channel that we can all enjoy and see what you did tonight. So thank you again to everybody. And as more programs come up, whether or not it's more of these community programs with VAPA and other things in the art department, we will be in contact with everyone through our email and newsletter. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thanks.
Thank you. Jonathan just said to high five each other. Thank you, Raimundo.
Oh, yeah, do the high five. Woo!
Stay strong, folks.
Bye.